Every single brew method is using extraction to get the magical flavors out of the coffee bean and put them into your coffee mug. Every single one of them is using a set of variables that we're going to go over today and help you understand how to control them so that you can get the cup of coffee with the flavors you really love that you really want to drink.
And one of the famous sayings that we have in the coffee business is you can't take a bad bean and make it into a good cup of coffee. You have to start with a good bean, go through the process of the farm, processing it, getting it shipped, getting it into the storage, getting it roasted, and then into your brew method and into your cup. Any of those things don't work right, and it'll degrade the taste of your coffee that you end up with.
90% of your coffee that's in your coffee mug is water. So the other thing that you want to make sure you're taking good care of is your water.
The water filtration system that you use is important as well. In a city, we have chlorine in our water, and so a charcoal filter is vitally important to get the chlorine out because it fights with the oils in your coffee to get into your cup. And the same thing happens with hard water. So if you can soften that water a little bit, it helps it to pull those solubles out of the coffee bean and into your water for a better flavor profile.
So tell us a little bit about the Gold Cup standard and extraction.
Sure, the Gold Cup is 18 to 20% of the solubles that are in the coffee bean being pulled out into your cup. If you pull more than 22%, you start to pull in those bittering notes that you'll get if you over extract the coffee by letting it sit too long or too hot. If you are pulling less than 18%, you'll get a weak taste or sometimes a sour taste to your coffee.
That's what we call over extraction or under extraction, when you're getting more out of the bean than what you're wanting or less out of the bean than what you're wanting. So every time that you go to brew coffee, whether it's in a pour over, a French press, espresso, all of it, every brew method is extracting coffee. It is extracting flavor from the bean and putting it into liquid form so that you can drink it. So when we're talking about extraction, we are talking about all of the different things that each brew system is using to make that process happen. The variables that are in that, even though they're used in every system a little bit differently, they're all the same variables. You're talking about the temperature of your water, the time you're spent brewing, your grind of your coffee, and also the pressure that you're putting on those beans. All of these variables play together and interact with each other in every brew method. So there is some overlap in the way that they work and in the way that they extract coffee. Let's talk about grind. That's one of the variables that is most within your control. Grind matters because what you're doing when you grind your coffee is you are exposing the bean to the water, and how much surface area gets exposed to that water is very much controlled by your grind. So if you put a whole coffee bean in a hot cup of water, are you gonna extract coffee?
A little bit.
Tiny little bit. You're gonna get some kind of really sad water in that cup. But if you cut that bean in half, you've increased how much water can touch surface area of that bean, which means you're gonna extract a little bit more. Cut it in half again, and again, and again, and that's what you're doing when you grind coffee. You're just increasing how much space of that bean the water can come in contact with to pull out all of the flavor notes that you're wanting. One thing that's really important to remember about your grind is that you're wanting every piece of coffee bean that you're breaking down to be the same size. If you end up with a grinder that gives you inconsistent sizes of your grind, then you're gonna have little pieces of bean and big pieces of bean, and they will over extract and under extract in the very same cup, giving you some really off flavors.
So when we're looking at water temperature, if we're doing too high of a temperature, anywhere probably over 204 degrees, we'll start to pull out some of those bitter notes and burnt notes. If we keep it under 198 degrees, we'll be focused more on the sour or the weak taste of the coffee. We want to try to keep it in that 198 to 204 degrees for most brewing methods.
When we're talking about water, this is one of those variables that doesn't completely follow all of the rules every time and gives you a good example of how you can play around with it. Even though you have a temperature that's kind of like the gold standard of what you're pulling from, when you're using espresso, that's when you're using really hot water to pull the notes out of the coffee. When you're using cold brew, that's when you're actually using cold water. This is where the variable of time comes into play. The hotter your water, the shorter extraction time you need. The colder your water, the longer extraction time you're going to need. So in something like cold brew, you're looking at an extraction time of about 24 hours is how we do it. With espresso, you are pulling very quickly in a short amount of time with really hot water. The last variable that's coming into play here is pressure. Now, pressure is the variable that you as a home brewer are going to have the least involvement in. Your brew method is the one that's really using that. A good example of pressure is when you're pulling an espresso shot. You're using really hot water, a really fine grind, and a lot of water pressure to push that water through really, really quickly and extract really, really quickly. When you're doing something like cold brew or a French press, the pressure there is actually not really in play. It's called a free immersion method, and it's allowing the coffee bean to move freely in the water. French press is obviously using hot water, cold brew is obviously using cold water, and that's where your time is so important. With something like Chemex or a brew system, the pressure is actually coming from the gravity of just pouring through the beans. So now that we have talked about the science behind extraction, I want your main takeaway to be this is not an exact science. All of these variables can be played with, moved around, and messed with. The only way to do it wrong is if you don't like the coffee when you're done with it. All of these things, your water, your temperature, your time, these are things that you can adjust in your brewing to get the cup of coffee that you love, that tastes really good, and that you enjoy making. Thank you guys so much for watching with us and learning about extraction today. I'm Sam, this is my dad, Paul. Go have fun brewing.